All right, what's up, poetry people? My name is Ethan, and I'm working with Nicole on this project, and we're going to be doing some poems here from Juan Felipe Herrera, from his book Half the World in Light. And the poems we're going to be doing are Children of Space, For an Inhabitant, and Under the Sombrero of Reagan's Coiffure. These poems are really good, to say that. And there's a reason he won the Nobel laureate for this. But what I'm going to do first is talk about each poem individually, and then how they sort of fit together with the themes that he was trying to address. So the first up is Children of Space. Excuse me, let me turn my phone off here. Children of Space. This is a great poem just because it's so dark. I think he juxtaposes a lot of interesting things. It's sort of a small poem, and if I had more time, we would be able to read the poems, ideally. But that's not the case, and that's fine. But he juxtaposes, it's done in 3 parts, so there's part 1, 2, and 3. Part 1, he talks a lot about, it's about like the child's sort of innocence. Playground aches, children float through parking lots riddled with screams, and you get the sense of it being very sad, very sad. And then he sort of develops it later into something dark, and he's talking about, like a married couple in an apartment watching the children. The father coils the fingers around transparent shoulders in the air. The stains of this is a good one. The stains of the assassinations remain on their bodies. I thought that was, like, what the fuck does that mean? But it's very dark. So that's just the first part. Part 2, they enter windows, even their bones are changing. It's very deep, sort of a darkened sadness. And it's interesting because these themes are juxtaposed with each other. So you get the sense in the first part it's very like innocence, right? Like children playing. And then you start to see like, well, what's going to happen when these kids grow up? Are they going to be as unhappy as these parents or this married couple who's watching them, who are clearly not happy if you read the poem. And not only not happy, just like the way he uses language, you get the sense that there's something like, dark and horrible about them, and that something is almost painfully ironic about them. So that's the first poem. Yeah, here's the second poem. The second poem here was For an Inhabitant, which is great. Moving on to a lighter topic. Which is great because in For an Inhabitant you have this theme of what it's like, I imagine, for somebody who has been deemed like an other. We talk about otherism. We teach it in schools as a concept, like what is it like to be the other. So we have this idea of like what it's like to be an other, but also at the same time for that person to feel like they're still a part of the same country. And he uses a lot of stuff about that here. If I can just organize my pages here, excuse me. Like here's a great little thing from it. I stay up at night hearing the crackle of the toaster, the sizzle of tomatoes with peppers, the president's speech, and on the FM an old song by Astrid Gilberto. It's like, and then later he continues, we hear about suicide squads, a bomb in the Safeway market, supermarkets, or the Golden Gate. So it's like we get the sense that it's like he's different, like he's an other in that way, because he eats tomatoes with peppers, because his skin is different color. But he's still, he still watches the president's speech, and he's still around to hear about the bombs and the Golden Gate Bridge. So it's a very sort of humanizing take on it, I think. And it is sad. It is very sad. So that's For an Inhabitant, and we can get into the language and sort of a deeper interpretation later as this continues. But the third poem here is Under the Sombrero of Reagan's Coiffure, which is just a great name. To be honest, great name. This also, there's a deep irony to it, I think. There is nothing here, absolute shadow, a taciturn machine gun, and a secretary lie tangled elsewhere. Social workers, pool sharks, and novelists have all undergone the prescribed reconstructions. I think what he's saying here is that, well, he obviously was no fan of Reagan, but I think what he's saying here is that, especially with the social workers and pool sharks thing, it's that there's like a death of individuality, of individual thought, right? That people just sort of like cling to this partisan rhetoric and they sort of just spew it back and forth at each other. And meanwhile, there's like no content in any of it. And there's horrible atrocity going on somewhere way far away that we're probably never going to go to, like ever, like Saudi Arabia, for instance. And it's interesting because he ends with it. Colette predicts a hasty ending from her loft somewhere overlooking the bay, right? So everybody wants to like pontificate on these things. Everybody thinks they have like an opinion, which is valid. You know, we have opinions, but it's very like disassociated from, I think, the reality, and that's sort of like the dark irony of what Mr. Herrera was going for. So, having sort of gone through a little bit of these poems, we can talk about the language. First of all, I think the language, like we touched on before, is to me it's violent. He uses like assassin a lot. There's another poem somewhere else where he's talking about it's in For an Inhabitant, where he's talking about wrapping a wire around a dignitary's neck. And again, I want to touch on this idea of like there's a bit of a painful irony to it, like something painfully ironic has happened, and people are just generally unaware of it. Excuse me. And the whole Colette thing, ironic. Children of Space, there's a beautiful irony in that. Innocence can be corrupted just sort of by living in this world, which is unfortunate, but that's the reality that Herrera saw, and I think he's right. The imagery is one of intense sadness, I think, and he uses a lot of juxtaposition to sort of get this across. I think you get my point. We can move on from the imagery. So the theme, what is the central theme here? Well, that's a good question. The theme is that I think Herrera was trying to express this duality to the world that we live in. That things are complex. That things are that there is a darkness in this world, that there is sort of an ironic, excuse me, I can't seem to find the words, disassociation. There's an ironic sort of disassociation that sort of goes along with sort of experiencing this world. But at the same time, there still is light. There still are children playing. There's still, a joy, I assume, that parents would get from watching these children play. Like in the first poem, Space Children of Space. So, yeah, that's the video here. Again, my name was Ethan, and I'm working with the wonderful and lovely Nicole, who's standing over there with the cue cards. Thank you, Nicole. And I hope you enjoyed this documentation of Herrera. Thank you.